Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Dan Haberkost. Dan Haberkost, CEO of Front Range Land, started his real estate investing journey at the age of 16. Dan has managed to build an impressive real estate business and portfolio that allows him the freedom to live and work where he wants. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great, Kendall. How you doing?
Doing great, doing great. I've wanted to have you on the show for quite some time, so I'm glad we could finally coordinate it and get it all worked out.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. So tell us, how'd you get started in doing land deals?
Yeah, so it's a long story, but I'll make it as succinct as I can. To the bio you just read, when I was 16, I was managing somebody else's rental properties along with his farm while I was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, so did that for a number of years as a high schooler. Worked other jobs throughout college. The last 2 years of school, I worked full time while going to school full time, which wasn't a whole lot of fun. But I had been managing other people, managing businesses, all kinds of things for years by the time I was 20. And so I said, all right, high school and college haven't been a whole lot of fun, but how do I take this experience, this skill set, and apply it to some sort of business as an adult so that I can put myself ahead? And so I started reading different books about equities, different types of investments, businesses, and like everyone else, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was the light bulb moment.
Right.
So 21, I bought a duplex just as a house hack. Lived in one side, rented out the other. Still own that today. Moved out to Colorado from Ohio, bought another house hack out here. Still own that one today too. And around that time, I realized the low and no money down stuff is great for selling books and courses. But if you want to invest in real estate, you need to figure out how to make a lot of money, right? You need a cash printing machine to then put into the hard assets when we're talking about buy and hold rentals right now. And so that was when it clicked that I need to go start an active business. I hated having a job anyways. Like working for somebody else wasn't sustainable. And so it was around that time that here in Colorado, I met a guy at the local real estate group who was also a land developer and had been for 40 plus years. And he needed help in his business. And so I would drive an hour south to Pueblo, West Colorado every weekend, help him in his business and learn from him. And ultimately, he was building houses on simple infill lots. And I started to help him source those lots. And this is way back in 2018, 2019. And so that was how I got my first start in land, was with just simple quarter acre infill squares for the purposes of building houses. And I actually helped him through new construction as well. So I've been building a few spec houses or duplexes at a time for years. And so that's where Front Range Land came from. And over time, that evolved in just a giant marketing machine all over the country, buying and selling land and building a few spec houses here in Colorado.
Yeah, that is fantastic. How did you learn? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a coach? How did you learn the land business?
It started with him, that older friend I keep mentioning, but he had done just about everything you could imagine under the umbrella of real estate over the last 40 years. And so it's like drinking from a fire hose. And so once I started to get a little traction with the land, I got distracted with other things and I didn't really get going for a few years. And eventually, I'm sure Brent Bowers, he and I used to host that real estate group together out here in Colorado. After a few years, I started hosting it. And we became friends, and I saw him doing quite well with land. And I'd done a few deals, but I needed the systems. I'm not a systems guy naturally. And so I actually just paid him for basically his whole business turnkey years ago. And then that was really what helped me to get going and scale.
Love that. And what types of land deals do you specialize in now?
It's still mostly infill lots that we buy and just resell to builders, but working on some bigger projects right now, some potentially subdivides, going through due diligence on a big piece in North Carolina, some stuff in Arizona, working on keeping the simple arbitrage going, but then layering on more value add strategies to really create more of a competitive advantage. And just, again, value add is how you really make more money.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the idea of getting your engine going. You've got your fundamental infill lot business rolling, and then you're going to be adding income streams to that. I see so many people just like switching midstream
Mhm.
and killing pipelines. I was one of those people when I first started,
Sure.
right? So I really like that idea. Talk to us a little bit more about your business model specifically. You mentioned simple arbitrage. If someone's listening to this, not really familiar with that term, what does your business model look like?
Buying and selling mostly. And so we send out about 10,000 mailers a month, along with a small portion of very specific cold calls. And we buy land anywhere from 30 to 65 cents on the dollar, depending on a variety of factors. There's a sliding scale there. And most of it we just resell on market. I don't do any assignments. Oh, I have, but years ago. I haven't done those in years. So we just list it on the market and resell it via realtors, because the end user for this sort of product most of the time is the mom and pop who's going to take it and put their dream home on it, or a small to big builder. I just sold one to DR Horton. The dispo side is very simple because we're listing most of it or all of it. And the acquisition side is where really the skill comes in, and specifically the acquisition managers. That's the main skilled position in the business. Everything else is fairly just transactional and simple.
Got it. So speaking of the acquisition process, you mentioned that when you bought your business, it was sort of turnkey. I'm sure you had some systems in place already. Talk to us a little bit about what your acquisition process looks like and how that's developed over time.
Yeah, great question. So this is something, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, that I think a lot of new people don't appreciate, and it's just the level of follow-up required to get deals. Every now and then we still send out letters or postcards mostly, and get somebody that they contact us, and within 5 to 7 days they're under contract. However, most of the time it's more like 3 to 6 to 12 months. The amount of deals we have pulled from old leads from 9 to 12 months ago, it's a good portion of what we've gotten recently. I think follow-up is underappreciated. We follow up relentlessly. We have, on the far left, we use Pebble for our CRM, and we have a long-term follow-up column, and we're always pulling deals from there. It's amazing how often somebody a year later is just suddenly ready to sell. But to answer your question more specifically, beyond my little rant about the amount of follow-up required, it comes most of the time, the leads come in via phone, sometimes email, sometimes physical mail, but mostly phone. My acquisition managers take the calls. Most of them they answer live, but sometimes they miss it if they're on the call and call them back. Then it's pretty straightforward. They build rapport. They try and really dig into what the person wants. Why aren't you just listing this on the market? And if they appear to be our avatar, i.e. our seller, then they'll do their due diligence and make an offer. And that ranges, as far as how long that takes, pretty dramatically. With some of these simple info lots in Florida, it takes about 5 seconds to do due diligence because there's thousands of comps. Whereas some of these big pieces of acreage in North Carolina could take 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on everything involved. And so just something I really want to emphasize there, just over communicating with the seller is what's really important in the acquisition process, because much of our competition does not. I can't tell you how many of these people say, I'm getting letters all the time. And then we dig into that. And, oh, they don't call me back. Or, oh, I don't really think that person's legitimate. Continuing through, let's say we've done our due diligence. We make the offer. A big part of our value proposition, something that gets us calls via our letters and postcards, is legitimacy. So many people come from housing, apartments, but especially housing, people who are wholesalers, and they're looking for distress. And I've done hundreds of land deals, and distress is rare. It's usually apathy. It's more they have money and their time is more important than their money. And so I took cash out of my postcards. I took everything. These terms have become scammy in these sellers' minds, where ours focuses on legitimacy. And we also like to allude to the fact that we actually have a clue about building, because that's what they bought the lot for. And many of these sellers are old developers that build on most of their lots and they have a couple left. And so having a clue about building really gives us a leg up. And we always emphasize proof of funds. And so that gets us deals quite a bit, where we send our standardized frequently asked question sheet, our standardized email with a proof of funds, and our contract. And I can't tell you how many times that has gotten us deals when they have a bunch of other offers, some of which are higher than ours. Many times.
That is
I'll pause.
Yeah, that's really good. Because that's what differentiates you from the I took a course and now I'm just going to send a bunch of mail to one pager. Whereas if you have these frequently asked questions lists, if you've got all of the documents there, it feels a little bit more official.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time on that. Just I have a pretty well built out SOP sheet, and we have all FAQ sheets, and just we putting them in touch with a title agent or attorney, depending on the state, is really important there, and just building that trust and legitimacy. But all that to say, at that point, we get the lot under contract, we send it into title, and in Florida and North Carolina, I have an excellent attorney and title company that they do a lot of the transaction coordination for us. Yeah, that's been really nice. But a high level overview of the process, just emphasizing a few things that we found to be really important.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. I'd love to dive in a little bit more to your avatar because you
Mhm.
mentioned your avatar earlier. Talk to us a little bit about what that is for your business.
I'll give you a great example via a deal we got a couple months ago in Cape Coral. This one stands out to me because I just remember it vividly. I think I forget the exact numbers, but we made an offer on her lot. She was considering it. It was in a really hot part of Cape Coral, which is already one of the hottest parts of Florida. And then I remember my acquisition manager sent out the contract and everything, and she disappeared. And a week later, she calls him back, and I actually listened to this phone call. And she goes, I talked to a realtor. I know what I can sell it for, but I don't want to deal with it. You guys are fine. And that's the avatar 80, 90% of the time, occasionally distressed, but 80, 90% of the time, it's the person that bought it at pennies on the dollar 30 years ago. They have plenty of money. They're tired. They don't want to deal with realtors or offers or anything. It's like, you make this easy for me. Sure, take it. So I think that's a good kind of description of the avatar. And so number one in their mind is legitimacy. So often when these people first call, if you've ever read the Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff or whatever, he talks about the old brain or the amygdala, and getting past the amygdala where they're just trying to figure out, are you a scammer, is step one. You can't start talking about anything logical until you get past that in their mind. So that's a big part of it because older people tend to be the sellers. They also tend to be the people that are targets of scams. And so, number one, make sure you get past that. And in their mind, they know you're legitimate. And then from there, it's just making it easy, making it easy for them. And that involves often, I heard there's a sales coach I hired for one of my acquisition managers, and she always said peeling the onion. Some of these people, you talk to them and they don't want to list it, but they haven't sold it. And you really got to build a rapport, build the trust, and dive in and figure out, Kendall, what's really going on here? Why you're not going to build on it? Take the money and put it elsewhere. You're just wasting your money on taxes. And again, I ran it a little bit there, but I think after you build trust, from there, it's getting past that apathy.
Yeah, that is so important. So many great nuggets in that. And you mentioned a lot of times these sellers are older people and they are
Mhm.
typically the targets of scams. So they have to know that you're not a Nigerian prince somewhere trying to take their property. You're actually a legitimate company. But I also love what you talked about in terms of follow up, because I think that
Yes.
is something that doesn't really get talked enough about because it's
Hmm.
not as sexy as lead gen, right? Like
Yes.
I think everyone loves like the, oh, we're getting all these leads. It's fantastic, but it really is the long game. That follow
Yeah.
up that's so important. So talk to us about your follow up process. What does that look like? How do you nurture these sellers for 6, 9, 12 months so that way when
Mhm.
they're ready to sell, they go to you?
Yeah, so we have a standardized follow-up SOP, but there's a spectrum depending on how the conversation goes. But assuming, so let's just say you're the seller, I'm talking to you, and you tell me I want 40K and it's worth 35. Okay, then we'll do a takeaway and say, look, Kendall, we're investors. Honestly, we're buying them around 15 to 20. So we can just send you our realtor. Great. Then we can get referrals for our realtor for those people that are solid retail clients. Now, if they cringe at that, because it's a good way to figure out, is this really our avatar? If they cringe when you say, oh, no, then all right, this is our seller. So assuming that they aren't the clear retail avatar, then if maybe we just couldn't meet in the middle and they're too high and we're too low, but it's not crazy, we'll put them in the long-term follow-up and follow up every 2 to 4 weeks, just depending on what all was said in the conversation. And we've gotten deals that way. And not only that, but in Florida and North Carolina, we are getting deals right now because the prices have gone up so much in a lot of these markets. And there's a couple markets I just posted about this where prices are rapidly increasing and we're having a field day because we're going back, we're finding the old leads and we're paying them what they wanted. And now we can make a nice spread on it because prices are going up.
Nice. Yeah, that's fantastic. So your actual follow up, is that a phone call? Is it an
Oh,
email? Is it a text?
yes. Vast majority of the time, a phone call. Yes.
Excellent. And so, how do you deal with the issue of following up every 2 to 4 weeks for 12 months? This could be anywhere between 14 to 28 phone calls in the course of 12 months. How do you position these calls so it doesn't sound like, hey, do you want to sell your land? No. hey, ready to sell your land? How do you position yourself with those follow-up calls?
When I think about many of the deals that we've actually closed after that long, I'm probably after the first few months, a lot of times I'd say I'm exaggerating there a little bit. It's more like every 1 to 2 months, unless there was something they said that made us think sooner. So I overstated how frequently there. But usually you reference something from a prior conversation, or 1 month they don't answer, you leave a voicemail. And then 6 weeks later, you call them. That time they do answer, but you haven't actually spoken in 3 months. And if you have a good rapport, it's not hard to, maybe come up a little bit and, hey, we reevaluated. We can do 18 instead of 16. Or you come up with an excuse to call back every time. And just as a quick side note, guys, I have a rule for my acquisition managers. If we're going to increase price, you have to have a legitimate justification, or else you sound like you're just throwing numbers at the wall and seeing what sticks. Now, don't get me wrong. If it's worth 100 and you offer 50 and they go 55, okay, fine. Go ahead, come up, make the deal. But in general, be careful about that, or else you're going to start thinking, how much more could this person pay? What are you just throwing numbers out there? It's got to be, you know what, Kendall, we were wrong. It's a little bit bigger than we thought. Or our realtor drove by. It's clearer. That'll save us some money on clearing. We can pay a little bit more. Always have a reason for your price increases.
That's really good advice. Talk to us a little bit more about rapport, because we know that rapport is extremely important in developing the trust in these nurture sequences. So what are some tips and tricks that you have that you use to build rapport with your sellers?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I'm working on getting better here because I'm terrible about this. I'm the driver that just wants to get it done and but that's not the best way to close deals for the vast majority of people. And so that's why, number one, I'm hiring a sales trainer that's better at it than me for my people, but I can still do as I say, not as I do thing here. We have a couple questions we like to ask. And of course, the easiest one is, what did you intend to do with the land? And start with that and see what they say. And it does get a lot of people talking, but if they're a little bit harder to get anything out of, we like to say, Kendall, we're going to look into everything involved in building on this lot, from wetlands to flood zones, topography, so on and so forth. So I know maybe you don't want to talk too much here. Maybe I know you might not be as interested in talking to me as I am to you, but it'll help slow down the due diligence or speed up the due diligence process, and we'll be able to get you an answer here sooner. So that's a good way to get them talking, just bringing up, hey, we need to know if this is buildable. What can you tell me? A lot of times that gets them talking as well.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. In your model, you're actually closing on these properties. I'm assuming that there's some capital that's required to be able to do this in your business, right? So talk to us about how you go about funding these deals. Do you use private lenders? Do you use your own money? What does this look like for you?
Yeah, so it's a mix. I've used a lot of my own cash over the years. I still am, but trying to do less. And then more recently, I have quite a few investors, several lines of credit. And very recently, for anyone that I see JP on here, so he knows Mason. Mason and I, a close friend of mine who has a similar business, are launched ground up partners where we're actually solving our own problem by joint venturing and providing the capital for land deals. Ourselves
Excellent.
included.
That's very cool. I love the creativity in that. Are you actively currently raising private capital from other investors, or is it just more the JV type structure? Hey, land fans. Looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the Only Land Fans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at onlylandfansgroup.com and join the conversation today. That's onlylandfansgroup.com. See you there.
We get the capital, and then we are JVing with other people via ground up partners.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
So yes and yes, but on different sides of the same coin. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you go about raising money for your deals?
That's been via my real estate group in town, my podcast, coming on other podcasts like this. But a lot of that's come from relationships I've built here locally in Colorado, because I've been hosting that real estate group The one I used to host with Brent before he moved for years now, and that has been very useful.
Excellent. Very good. If you're in the business of raising capital for your own business, right?
Hmm.
I know that it's very common to always be, money is everywhere. So
Hmm.
just be on the lookout for it. So, what tips do you have? Let's say you're out to dinner and someone comes by your table, starts up a conversation, and asks, "What do you do? How do you like to respond to that?"
Yeah, I don't ever want to sell anyone on anything. I just talk about what I'm doing. And if they ask you specifically about how they could invest, I like just talking about how I've done it with other people. If you're brand new and you don't have a point of reference, ideally you're coming on calls like this and learning so that you can just learn from other people and use that as your example. But yeah, I just in general, just talking about what I'm doing has gotten me people that are interested.
That's great. And so, do you have any special phrases that you like to use when people ask you that question, what do you do, versus I buy and sell land, or
Mm.
I turn land into cash, or whatever it is?
Yeah, if it's somebody I don't actually want to have the conversation with, I just say I'm in real estate and they assume I'm a realtor, and that's fine if I don't
Yeah,
want to talk to them. If it's somebody I do want to talk about, I say quite simply, I have an active land and development business, which allows me to invest in rental real estate.
excellent. I love that. Very good. How long have you been in your business? How long have you owned your business now?
With the land, I started that in 2018, but I told you it wasn't really until 2020 that I really got it going.
Got it. So even from 2020, we've seen the market go through some pretty dramatic changes in some places in the country. Can you talk a little bit about where do you see the market going now, and what have you done to pivot that way you're thriving in this upcoming market shift?
Oh, yeah, I got a major kick in the teeth beginning of last year that forced me to pivot. So, beginning of 2022, the primary market I was doing business in, I had dozens and dozens of deals there, was Pueblo West, Colorado. And that's where I built. That's I bought and sold a lot of land. I own some rentals down there. And with no warning at all, the Metro District, which is the governing body for the little municipality, shuts down all new water taps. All new water taps. And for anyone that has no experience with actual development, that is your source of water. These lots are not large enough to drill a well. You need 35 acres in that county. So essentially, without those water taps, the land is worthless. It's not buildable. You can't do anything. You can't park an RV, nothing. And so that was awful. I was flying home from Florida, and anyways, that was a rough day. Now, for no, what was it? 8 weeks later, we find out they opened back up the taps in limited supply at a higher price. It ended up being okay. I was able to get rid of those lots and still make a little bit of money, not at the price expected. It was okay. But that forced me to pivot. And so I thought about it. And the same thinking or same strategy as today is where is everybody going? The Southeast, right? The Southeast is blowing up. And not just because people want to live there, but because it's affordable. And so as we head into next year, I look at the markets where I'm really thriving right now, and they're all affordable. And so that's the biggest thing in my mind that kind of shelters you from the high interest rates, the high prices, everything that's going on, is stick with entry level real estate in below the median price point markets. And that's working very well for me because, like I just told you, in North Carolina and Florida, I'm watching several of my main markets continue to increase in price because they're so cheap, relatively speaking.
That's really good insight and leads me to my next question, which is how do you go about picking your target markets? You mentioned a little bit about affordable housing. Can you dig a little bit deeper and give us some insight into that?
So I will say, on the more qualitative side of things, several of the markets I've had tremendous success in were just by referrals from competent realtors or friends of mine who, like the older buddy of mine, has pointed me in the direction of several markets that have produced very well. One of the Florida markets that's doing really right now was via my realtor. He said, "Hey, go over here." But besides that, let's just pretend you have no contacts in the real estate market. And so I'll go on Zillow. This is so simple, but it works. I'll go on Zillow, and especially if you're new, I wouldn't recommend starting downtown of any major metros, right? Don't go mail in Denver or Los Angeles or Wilmington, but look at the places that are growing. So I'm looking at the map on Zillow, and I've sold lots in the last 90 days up. And I look at second or third level markets that I've never heard of. And of course, I have an advantage there where I have dozens of friends in land. And so I have a decent sample size there. And My most profitable market this year in North Carolina, I found this way. So this is real. This is how I'm actually making money and finding markets today. Look around for the second and third level markets that are still affordable, right? If the houses are 800 grand, I'm probably not as interested. Still affordable, 200-300s for new builds, and where lots of land is selling. And so pretending we're scrolling around on a screen together right now, if I come across a market, it's a second, third level market outside of one of the growing cities in North Carolina, I would look, okay, in the last 90 days, how many lots sold in the city? And then I would flip to for sale, how many came on the market in the last 90 days? And when I see ratios of 150, 200%, okay, there's huge demand. And if I see a price point of like 30 to 100, really like 30 to 70, but there's, call it 30 to 100, keeping it more reachable for most of the middle class boomers. Then I'll go to new builds. I'll go to 2023 or newer houses. Who's here building? Do I see some of the big names, at least the regional or merchant builders? Do I see a bunch of mom and pops as well? Are those ratios strong as well? Or if I look in the last 6 months, solds versus newly listed, is it a strong ratio for new builds? Okay, assuming all that checks out, then I would start calling some of the local realtors. And this again is where some of the, I always mix these up, qualitative data comes in. And to that market I referenced in North Carolina, when I was doing this, it was about a little over a year ago, I called a couple realtors, and the first one I talked to had no idea what land investing or wholesaling was. I told him about a lot I was looking at, and he goes, "Oh, that's not on the market. You can't buy that." And so the picture I'm painting here, guys, is talking to some of the locals showed me there aren't a lot of competent people on the business, realtor, investor, developer side, but there's massive consumer demand. So it's mismatch, right? You go to Florida, any market, any realtor, they know exactly what you're doing. They know what an assignment or a double close, right? They're very up to speed, right? Because it's very hot and very competitive down there. But in this market, wasn't the case. And so that I look for, those qualitative factors that show me that there's a lot of demand when I saw the sales ratios, but there doesn't seem to be, I'm not hearing about it on every podcast. I don't have, my friends aren't talking about this market. When I call realtors, they aren't familiar with land investing, right? That's a good sign. I don't have a good way to quantify that, but that's just talking to people.
Yeah, that's really good. And for someone that may be brand new listening to this, when you say second or third level, what does that mean? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's Triple Digit Flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything.
Communities for the major metros. So that place, Pueblo West, Colorado, for anyone that's familiar with Colorado, it's pretty simple because there's mountains in the way. So the main, as far as the Front Range, there's I-25. Denver got really expensive. So people got pushed up and down and to Colorado Springs. And for a long time, Colorado Springs, where I live, was a bedroom community, a second level market to Denver, the main metro. But over the last 10 years, Colorado Springs has grown a lot. There's a lot of jobs here now. And so people got pushed even further down the highway, another hour, to Pueblo West. So Pueblo West, I would consider a third level or a tertiary market. It's mostly a bedroom community to Colorado Springs, Pueblo, the actual city, or just people working remote. Places like that have done very well. The places, if I was in Texas, which I'm not, but if I were, I would probably follow the major highways between the major metros and look for what's going on along there. Where are people pushed? Look at the major arteries for transportation and look in the outskirts and see what could be up and coming or just starting to boom.
That's really good advice. And let's talk a little bit more about what your specific criteria for deals actually is. So if you mentioned 30 to 70,000, but can you give us a little bit more insight to that?
Yeah, so our bread and butter, this drives me nuts in some regard, but I have done a million deals that have made between $7,000 and $20,000 over and over again, buying between 5 and 30 and selling for double or close to double. Now, one thing I want to highlight here, so many people from land 2, 4, 5, 6 years ago that were focused on actually raw land. That word gets misused all the time. I'd love to explore that in a minute, but bookmark that. Who are actually flipping raw recreational land, parts of Colorado, parts of Mojave County, land, well, it's subdivided, but point being, land that isn't going to have a new construction house put on it, and it's very rural, it's harder to sell. The heuristics that people have from that is, oh, I need to at least double my money, are ridiculous when you apply it to a developed city and a piece of dirt that has water, sewer, power, and nice houses on both sides. And so my point in saying this is, I'll give you an example from this week. I closed a lot last Friday for $30,000. All in with closing costs, I want to call it $31,200. Now, this is one of the hottest markets I'm in, and this specific sort of product, it's a duplex lot, which are very desirable there. It sells like this every time. And I'm only selling it for 50, but it's already under contract at 50 with a 3-day due diligence period and like a 2-week close. So I don't care that I'm not doubling my money. I will make, after paying my acquisition manager, like 14 grand on it. 14 grand on $30,000 in 3 weeks. Yeah, I like the dance, Brad, is great, but people pass these deals all the time. So there's a spectrum where in the really hot markets where land is selling overnight, there's 200% as many lots selling in the last 90 days as came on the market. I'm okay with smaller margins, which compared to any other asset are still exceptional. And then go into example, we're funding a deal via Ground Up Partners in the mountains of North Carolina. A lot of that land sits much longer. And so we're closer to, what are we buying at, 22,850, and we're listing at 60,000. So there's a spectrum. I don't have a hard and fast rule. I buy at 45 cents on the dollar. It depends on how hot the market is, because that accessible middle class 30 to 50 price point in a lot of these Florida markets is borderline liquid. So I'll take smaller margins there, and then mountains of North Carolina or mountains of Colorado, a little slower, a little less certain. I want a much bigger margin.
Got it. So the higher the risk, the higher the margin needs to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. You mentioned you were sending out 10,000 mailers a month here on the acquisition side. What type of response rate are you seeing, and what type of basically stat are you looking at X number of mailers per deal that you're getting?
I wish I had this better quantified, because I think in statistics and 10,000 mailers to a bunch of different markets, am I really getting a large enough sample size to have a true regression to the mean there? Probably not. And my CRM Pebble, it doesn't let me differentiate. So when my acquisition manager puts in a lead via cold calling, it gets attributed to that campaign as being a response. So those numbers aren't perfect either. I think it's somewhere between a low 1%, like 1.25% to 0.75% response rate approximately. And as far as mailers per deal, it seems to be 1,500-ish, 2,000, but I don't have those numbers perfectly quantified. If I was sending 1 million mailers a month, I'd be able to tell you much better. But it's tough with land, because you have to be in a lot of markets to send out a lot of mailers. And then even within markets, there's little sub-markets. So I don't know. It's hard to accurately quantify.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Only Land Fans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action. Got it. So whenever these sellers are calling in on your letters, you mentioned that they're calling directly to your acquisitions managers. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about your team. What does that team look like? Are they stateside? Are they in an office? How do they function?
So they're remote in the US. So they don't have an accent. I've tried using VAs remotely, and that didn't go well, especially in the South. And so both of them, the only caveat to that, the first acquisition manager I ever hired had a British accent from South Africa. She did amazing. British accents are thought of as like high class. So those do great on the phone. But yeah, so they're both here, one in Denver, one in Los Angeles. And yeah, you've got to hire the right type of person, number one, who can self-manage to a degree. And then you also need to have your SOPs and KPIs really built out to put them in somewhat of a box. So they have clarity on what they're doing all day, how to structure their day, what metrics they need to hit. And so I had to spend a lot of time on that. And they have very clear KPIs to hit and SOPs. And yeah, they take the calls, they manage the pipeline. We do a couple calls a week, and it's been good. That's one of the biggest things right now that's a bottleneck. I thought about this the other day. I could afford another acquisition manager. I could afford to send more mailers. The main bottleneck is my ability to train and place competent people. And so I'm working on getting better there because that's essential to scaling any business.
Absolutely. And I think you read my mind. I was about to ask you, what does your training program look like with your employees?
Yeah, so I have built out videos going through all our SOPs, all the processes from comping to just everything involved in the business. And so I have them watch that. Of course, the CRM has its own training videos. I'll go through quite a few leads with them when they're starting. And then I help them with the comps. They'll tag me in Pebble and we'll go through things together. And then slowly and steadily take the training wheels off to the point where they're making offers and getting lots under contract without even consulting me, assuming it's not a big one or anything like that.
Excellent. And so do your letters, are these neutral letters, blind offers? What are your mail pieces like?
I did blind offers for years. Let's see, it was about a year ago. I don't think I've sent a blind offer for almost a year now. It's been all neutral postcards. And again, open to being told I'm wrong. I talked to Pete Reese last week, who's doing this at a huge scale with Pete, and he's doing all blind offers. So I'm not saying that my way is the only way. I am doing all neutral letters as of now. And part of that is just that I'm not taking the calls. And so I would rather not put in the time and effort for the land offer letter and then transfer additional work to my employees than vice versa. But part of that as well is I do know for a fact we would not have gotten some of the deals we had gotten if I priced a letter and sent it out, and they would have never called. Some of them. Right. But there is a higher volume of total calls. And one more caveat or kind of differentiation I want to make here is if you're out in somewhere that's rural and you can just do a price per acre, that's really different. A lot of what I'm doing, if I were like the idea of mailing a whole county in the places that I'm in, I would be mailing lots that are for, commercial. That could be your Walmart plus residential plus multifamily plus ag. And that wouldn't make any sense to try and price all that together. Part of it just depends on where you're doing business. Because if you're, in a mountainous county where it's just acreage that everyone would just build a house on, then that would probably make more sense to price as opposed to a metro where you have, the full gamut of zoning and uses for land where they're totally different. That would make way less sense to try and price all that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a fantastic differentiation right there. Pete's fantastic. I think one of the things that I love so much about the land business is there's so many different ways to structure it and make it all work. The reason why I asked you about these neutral letters is I'm curious about your process when those leads come in or the calls come in. Your acquisitions manager starts the report process, starts gathering a little bit of information. At what point do you guys start comping? And then after you comp, how do you get back to them? What does that whole flow look like for you?
Okay, so I'll give you two answers. One is for the really simple infill homogeneous. Think of the tracts in Florida where there's thousands of lots, so they're the same. For those, let's say you call in, I'm the acquisition manager, and we're buying around 20 approximately. And again, we know that because there's thousands of the exact same thing over and over again. We always try and get them to throw a number out first, but a lot of times they don't. And if they don't, then it's just, oh, okay, Kendall, we'll do our due diligence. But just as an idea, we just bought one on 37th Street for 20 and one on 41st at 18. So we'd probably be in that ballpark. And see how you react. If you say, no, I want 50, then, oh, great, okay. We're investors. If you want retail, we're happy to send you to a good realtor. And all these statements are really intentional because that one right there, I call it the takeaway, right? Where, oh, no worries. Here's our realtor you can go sell on market, and we're fishing for how they react. I think I said it earlier because sometimes they say, oh, okay, great. And then sometimes they say, no, okay, we can talk about it. And so these are just ways to filter people because there's a good portion of people we don't want to talk to, and that's fine. So for those sorts of lots, easy, quick, comping is incredibly simple because, again, you have tens of thousands of the same exact lot. Now, on the flip side, we've gotten some more interesting leads, and especially in North Carolina, there's a lot more due diligence in some of the markets we're in, and the plats are all over the place. And so for those, a lot of times it's, hey, Kendall, okay, we're going to do, and I tell my acquisitions people to be really specific here. We're going to verify the topography, check and see if this was ever perked, looking at the wetlands, the flood zones, everything that goes into building. And again, all that's intentional too, because in this process, we're just building trust and legitimacy in their mind that we know what we're talking about. We have a process. We're an actual development company. And that really differentiates, because you got to remember, guys, if you're anywhere in the Southeast, these people are getting just endless amounts of mailers and cold calls from many people who know nothing about land or development. They go through that and then they set a clear expectation. I'm going to get back to you by this time. And even if due diligence isn't done, they'll at least call and tell them. And then, yeah, they make sure there's buy-in and agreement to all. Does that work? Do I need to get back to you sooner? And then they go do the due diligence.
Very good. Very good. Now let's talk a little bit about what are some of your main deal breakers?
Deal breakers. Price is the biggest one. In some of these, okay, like in the North Carolina market I'm in specifically, they're smaller lots, yet they're still generally on septic and well. And so if it's in a wetland and it's not right on the coast, highly desirable, and it has not been perked, won't buy it, because that market is very much a dichotomy of, if it fails, it's never really a failure. It's just that the cost to fix the problem makes it, for all intents and purposes, a failure, because it's a cheap market. You can always solve that problem with enough money, but if you're not in an expensive area, nobody will do it. So it might as well be worthless. But we won't buy it if it's in a wetland, hasn't been perked, and looks to be wet. We'll just no. So that's a deal breaker. Gosh, if there's no access, unless it's somewhere really expensive, then no, we're not going to buy it. There aren't a lot, though. At the end of the day, if there are comps somewhere that, or even if there aren't comps, but it's somewhere where there's demand and I can validate that and we can buy it at a huge discount, then we'll make an offer. There are very few we won't make an offer on. I closed a lot today for $1,500 because it's not in a great area. If we're going to list it at 20 and see what it sells, always make an offer.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's jump over to the dispo process. What does your dispo process look like? I know that you mentioned realtors earlier, but can you talk to us a little bit more about what your specific dispo flow looks like?
Yeah. So this is essential because it helps on the acquisition side as well. Having a local expert is so important. I mentioned earlier, one of our most productive markets right now came because our realtor, Dan, as we call him in Florida, told us, hey, man, get up here. This area is booming, before anyone knew. And so part of the value of selling with realtors is having them on the ground to check out lots when we're not sure, to just triple check our comps. And there's also nuances of every market where, like in North Carolina, every lot I sell, I get non-refundable earnest money. That's not normal anywhere else for retail buyers. And so having a local expert that can help you with navigate just the specificity of that market is really valuable. So that's part of why we list with realtors. To answer your question, I line this up so that the moment we are closed, it goes live. So I let our realtors know weeks ahead of time, hey, this is coming up. We got it under contract. It's going to be closed this day, and we can list it. Day of close, I have the title agent or attorney send the deed and all the closing docs to the realtor, because they know each other, our title agent, attorneys, and realtors. And they get it up live immediately, but we still also post it on Facebook and Craigslist. And it's funny, we have sold a lot of lots via Facebook or Craigslist that were listed on the market. And it didn't come from being listed on the market. So it's worth doing this, especially Facebook. It goes in waves. Haven't sold anything on Craigslist in a while, but in the past I have. And so that's about it, man. It's not that complicated because the realtors are doing a lot of the work there.
Yeah, that's really good. Before we dig into Facebook, because that's definitely a topic I'd like to chat with you about, let's talk about what are some tips that you have about identifying and vetting agents that you want to work with.
So the 80-20 rule very much applies here. And a lot of times it's like the 595 rule. You start scrolling around at solds. And a lot of times in any major markets, you can find a couple people who show up over and over again. So we start there, and then we'll call 2, 3, 4 of them and just get a feel for, do they want to be selling land, or did they just sell a couple because they felt they needed to for the client? And so we'll ask them questions and get a feel for, do they know builders? Are they knowledgeable on land? Do they want to be selling land? Do they want to work with investors? Go through all on that. The one we're funding with Ground Up Partners, I did a little due diligence on that myself just because I didn't know that market. And one of the first things I said to the realtor is, do you even want land listings? Because some people don't. That's fine. And so that's a good question. If you start asking them just about how much land they've sold, assuming they told you they want the listing, and feeling around, do you know builders, you can pretty quickly get an idea whether or not they're tapped into that, whether they have a clue. It's pretty easy. If you call 2, 3, 4 of them, there'll usually be 1 or 2 that stands out. And then I like to test. So like in my North Carolina market, we have 3 different realtors we kind of cycle through.
Excellent. Really good. I like that a lot. So let's jump back over to Facebook now. When you are listing your properties on Facebook or posting them, are you doing Facebook Marketplace? Are you doing ads? Are you just posting in investor groups? What does that process look like for you?
Just been doing Marketplace.
Okay.
Yep. And then just have respond to the first person and then copy and paste that response. And it usually has the actual listing link right there. And yeah, that's definitely worked for us consistently.
Very good. So you send over the listing link that's off the MLS. Excellent. Yep. Very good.
And part of one thing I just want to say on that's intentional, because then people who have no money or ability to close and are wholesalers that are just trying to waste your time, that filters them out as soon as they see it's listed. So that's intentional.
That's good. Yeah, lots of filtering needs to happen when you're on Facebook for sure.
Yes.
So tire kickers there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really smart. So what would you consider to be the most important needle moving activities for newbies in this market?
The front end lead measures, however that is, you generate the leads and then follow up on them. Whether it's a cold call or a mailer, or if you're texting, I'm not sure that's legal anymore, but if you're texting, that is essential. And this is something, guys, don't make the same mistakes I did. If you get a bunch of deals, I don't care if you feel overwhelmed. I don't care if you think you're broke and you can't take more. Do not stop your front end lead measures because you're screwing yourself. Yes, Brad, I did this to myself so many times. You have to keep those going or else you're screwing yourself over 90, 120 days down the road, no matter what. I religiously send 10,000 mailers a month. Every Friday, I send about 2,000 of them or 2,500 of them, depending on how the month's laid out. And so we don't stop that no matter what. And then same thing with the follow-up. You have to be relentless there. One of the best deals we got this year, or the best land deal we got this year, we got the lead, I want to say last November or December. And we didn't end up buying it, making a deal and buying it till June. And we bought it at 45. And within 3 days on market, it was under contract at 130, 500. And if we didn't follow up for 9 months, that probably had 50 follow-ups in it to get that. That was well worth doing.
Worth it. So can you say that one more time about how many follow-ups did it take for you to get that deal and what was the size of the deal?
Yeah, including text, calls, emails. I believe we're over 50 on that one because we had bought another lot for them and they were ghosting us on this one. And it was a weird one. And then we bought it for 45,000 flat and sold it for 130,500.
Man, I love that. I love that. Testament to follow-up. Money is in the follow-up, not just a cliche. It's real. It
is. And we never would have bought that deal if it wasn't for our expert local realtor who told us to, because there were 0 comps. We don't know the area. It was outside of Miami in Homestead, Florida. I would have been afraid to buy it at 45 if it weren't for Realtor Dan. So again, that we sold it on our own, but still gave him the commission because we would have never gotten it without him.
Yeah, thanks Realtor Dan for that, for sure. That's awesome. In your opinion, what's something that very few people or no one is really talking about in the land industry that we should be talking about right now?
Several things come to mind. I think just the simple proof of funds thing is really powerful for getting trust and getting deals. I think just differentiating between raw land and developed land, I rarely hear people talk about, and it's constantly misused. For listeners who are newer, if you go out, take Colorado, for example, east of Colorado Springs, there's just grazing land, farmland, right? It's just endless acreage that's zoned ag. There is no infrastructure. It's not even been subdivided. There's no roads. There's no utilities, nothing, right? You can't use that land for anything until you go through the entitlement process. So that's raw land. Whereas if I go to Pueblo West and I pull up the map on the GIS, it's been entitled and subdivided into, multifamily and then commercial and then residential and so on and so forth. A developer did all of that horizontal work to take raw land and get it to the point of being ready to be built on. So utilities are in place, roads. That I think is a really important differentiator because raw land is far more risky and takes a long time to get to the point of being buildable. Developed land, right? That infill lot that has all utilities in place, everything's ready to go between two houses is a very different product, and people don't realize that. And so this is, as a corollary, people will say, oh, building houses, that must be so difficult. I heard it took this guy 3 years. Like, what did he build on? Did he do the whole horizontal development and then the vertical? Because these Pueblo West lots takes 3 to 4 weeks to get a permit and then 6 months to build. It's really easy. And so that's an important distinction that few people make. And so I think that's something I could probably go on, but I can pause there for a moment.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. You mentioned proof of funds earlier. Before I forget, what does your proof of funds look like? What format is it in and that type of thing?
If it's somebody that's sophisticated, I will call my banker and have them send something over. If it's somebody that's unsophisticated, honestly, I go on my Chase business account. I take a screenshot where it says Front Range Land and then the number, and just that's been fine.
Excellent. Very good. Awesome. So what would you consider to be your superpower?
For me, it's motivating and driving other people to action. I've always been very good at speaking and getting other people excited about things.
Nice. So are you the visionary in your business?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Textbook visionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize it. I'm in that club. So
yeah.
What is your definition of success?
Freedom, where your priorities are, in fact, your priorities. Because, I just got back from a month in Del Mar. It was awesome. I went surfing every day. And that, for me, that's why I started a business. I'm going to see my family next week, right? That's why I started a business, so that I can do the things I want to do when I want to do them. And money and work are not at the top of that list. They enable that list.
That's excellent. Yeah, that really stuck out to me in your bio, that you have the freedom to live and work where you want. To me, that's the dream. That's the dream, right? For sure. Do you have any favorite entrepreneurs, thought leaders, influencers, authors that you like to follow?
Yeah, for all these people, remember, I'm not necessarily agreeing with every single thing they say, but I love a lot of what Alex Hormozy puts out. He has some excellent points in podcasts. There's plenty of things I disagree with this guy on, but he's very good. Ryan Pineda, the speed with which he has put together the whole system, the whole ecosystem he has is pretty incredible. And so there are definitely things to be taken from listening to his podcast. Some of them I don't like at all. Some of them I love. And then I'd say my favorite podcast, hands down, is Tim Ferriss's. And I've been listening to that for years because he gets the most successful people of whatever it is that they do, whether it's business or politics or movies, writing, anything. And I think it's really useful to listen to people who are as wealthy as you could ever want to be and famous, because it makes it clear, number one, that it doesn't solve all your problems. You're still a person. You still have the same problems everyone else has. And I think it's just, especially doing what I'm doing and assuming I plan to be very wealthy, and I expect that will happen. So I have been thinking about and preparing for how to handle that, so I don't end up like many of the other miserable rich people who were not prepared.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic point, because so often we hear as entrepreneurs that your business is only going to grow to the level that your own self-development has grown. And so there's so much of that inner work and mindset that's important, because you can just dump money on a poor mindset and it's still a poor mindset unless it's grown. So that's a really good point. If you could go back and tell yourself 3 pieces of advice when you were brand new in this land business, what would they be?
You don't get passive income until you figure out how to make money. Stop trying to buy rentals, go start an active business. That would probably be the first thing. Yeah. Brad, yeah, I think we're on the same page. Number 2 would be pick one active business and just focus on that, because you can make millions of dollars in a lot of different niches. Honestly, I'm in land ultimately because I met that guy I keep telling you about. I have a buddy with a big insurance agency. You can make a lot of money there and then buy real estate. It doesn't have to be necessarily in real estate making the money, but I think you should put it in real estate. So that would probably be number 2. Pick something and stick with it. And I probably would have worked to let myself have fun a bit sooner. I probably was overly frugal for a while there, because although I am young, I started working pretty early. And so I don't feel young in that regard. And I was probably a little overly conservative and frugal for a number of years there.
Yeah, managing rental portfolios at 16, that's pretty young.
Yeah. Yeah. That was interesting.
You took on some big responsibility at 16, so that's really
Yep.
good, man. So, what's your biggest passion or goal you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I'm reevaluating because I have done what I initially set out to do. So I'm working on setting some new goals. But yeah, you caught me at a weird time where I'm really thinking about that. I'm having a ton of fun building the main business and then the vertical integrations with the capital and everything else. And I want to travel more because as a kid, I never left Ohio. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. Nobody did. Nobody ever went anywhere or did anything. And so in these last few years, I've been making up for that. Yeah, I'm working on reevaluating and setting some new goals on that front.
Nice, nice. So we'll get an update in a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
Speaking back to the stereotypical visionary, it's definitely talking about big projects, goals, building things. That really is what gets me excited. Really anything that sounds like a challenge where I have to use my brain.
Love that. And for a visionary, for people that may not be super familiar with visionaries, what are some of your biggest challenges in your business?
Everything detail oriented, right? So speaking, sales, that tends to come more naturally to me, but it wasn't natural to build out all the SOPs, sitting still, listening to employee calls on call rail and coaching them going. That's a struggle for me. I'm pretty impatient naturally. The high level tracking properly, all the metrics, I need to get better there. So working on that. But really any accounting, for example, is an easy example of something I could just never do. That's just miserable, that kind of work. So anything detail oriented tends to be where I really struggle. Anything public speaking communication wise is where I thrive.
Yeah, I definitely get that. You're speaking directly to my heart right now, Dan.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you mitigate those challenges? Obviously, like a lot of people, they'll adopt an integrator, but before you got to the point where you're able to do that, how did you muscle through it, or did you piece together different people in your business to help with that? How did you go about that?
Yeah, part of it is just if you want something bad enough, you'll do it anyways. And so I did build out a solid SOP list. It's funny, people think I'm organized that don't know me, meet me, that, oh, you're really organized. So I just forced myself to do that because I'm not going to go high. I'm not at the point where it would make sense to go hire a COO to handle all this quite yet. So I just dealt with it and I did it, and that helped. I hired out the accounting. I worked to hire acquisition managers that weren't exactly like me, that were good at sales, but had a little more organizational skills. So that's part of it. But part of it too is I still need to get better and I still fall short there. So still working on it as we speak.
As we all are, my friend,
Mm-hmm.
we are all working to get better, that's for sure. I want to thank you so much for giving to us today, Dan. How can we give back to you right now? What types of connections or resources you're looking for currently?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is I have my own podcast with Mason, the Big Picture Blueprint. And if anyone needs a land deal joint ventured on and provided the capital, ground up partners, we're not technically a lender, we will joint venture with you. And you can find all the info on that and me and contact me via danhaberkost.com or on Facebook or Instagram.
Excellent. Very good. Well, thank you guys so much, Dan. Thank you. This has been absolutely fantastic. Reach out to Dan if you want to JV with him, and also check out his podcast, Big Picture Blueprint. So again, thank you so much, Dan. You've been incredible. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great week. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at onlylandfans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.